Welcome to Toasting the Classics, the podcast where we take something people call a classic and we drink something inspired by the classic while we talk about it and decide whether it should still be a classic. My name is Dave McArthur. We got a full house tonight.
I'm Chris Gragg.
Hello, Chris.
I'm Joe Iglesias.
Joe Iglesias, welcome back.
I'm Andrew Park, aka Andre Le Parc.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Yes, your nom de guerre.
Yeah, nom de guerre. I never thought of having a nom de guerre. I should probably get
a
one.
very literal nom de guerre in this movie. But we'll talk about that.
I didn't actually realize that. I thought that was actually the guy's name, the character. But so, what are we talking about, Joe? It sounds like you know what we're talking about. What is it?
Yes, we are watching the legendary cinema verite, the Battle of Algiers. Yeah, the story of how the French ultimately lost one of their colonies.
Well, they don't actually lose it in the movie, which is kind of one of the surprise. Maybe that's a spoiler, but they actually win the Battle of Algiers, and then it's sort of a postscript that they lost Algeria in the end. But this is a very realist film. It's in black and white, 1966. The director Gillo Pontecorvo is not one I had heard of before, if I'm being honest. I had a sort of half idea that this was French New Wave and might have been Truffaut or something. I knew very little about what this film actually was.
Yeah, same. I knew this movie just by reputation, even then, just that it was a famous war film. But the specifics beyond, it was about French colonialism were new to me. So yeah, I was very surprised constantly while watching this film.
Yeah, I had a lot of big surprises. You can't be anything but surprised if you don't know anything about the film, but I was surprised by things that happened during the film, like watching it just on a surface level. I was surprised by things that I read. I was inspired to choose this. I had it on my list and I was inspired. We were chatting about it. I was inspired by One Battle After Another, which very prominently features this movie. Leonardo DiCaprio's characters. Did you guys actually watch One Battle, by the way? Has anybody seen that other than me? No?
I have not.
I have not.
But Andrew, you did?
I did see it, and that was
Okay.
the reason why it came up for me in conversation, just because I thought you guys had all seen One Battle After Another.
I did. I saw it. And it made me think about I wanted to watch this movie because I had seen clips and I was kind of vaguely aware of the film, and I know it's one of these ones that, like we did The Searchers a little while back, that just has an absolutely gigantic status among filmmakers. Like this is I think a normal person, we can talk about this more as we go, but I think your average film goer could watch this and be like, well, that was interesting and just kind of move on. I think but for filmmakers, I don't know how many of the movies we watched growing up were inspired by this. I mean, so many of the different things. But the number one that jumped out at me, because it was one of my favorite movies, was Red Dawn. There's that sequence where Jean Martin is walking with the troops and he's got the sunglasses and the beret and everything, and that's directly filmed in Red Dawn. It's a total homage to that scene. And then the first scene where he's doing the counterinsurgency talk is filmed the exact same way also in both movies. So Milius was doing a callback to it, but there's a lot of them, and we could spend
There are quite a few. Yeah, the one that really jumped out to me was the Children of Men shot that they did. With a copy.
Was there a specific scene from Children of Men? Because I know Cuarón was quoted as saying he loved this movie and that Children of Men was inspired by it. That's all I saw. I didn't see any specifics.
Specifically, the milk cafe when it explodes. There's an outside shot.
Oh yeah.
Which is really similar to the intro shot of Children of Men.
The coffee.
Yeah, I think you called that out
one coffee shop when he goes into at the beginning. Yeah, totally. Yeah, good call.
Yeah, I think you definitely. Yeah, I think you called that out when we were watching it, Chris.
Well, that is one of my favorite movies. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's an episode that we did a while back. Anybody that wants to check it out, I really enjoyed watching that movie and didn't know anything about it before we did it. So this is, I guess, we're putting this in kind of a series of anti-colonialism movies because we just did RRR, if I'm not mistaken. Wasn't that the last thing we did together? So, I don't know if we want to give the impression that's sort of a fixation of ours. It's kind of an accident, as it turns out, because you go to one of those movies you go to in completely different ways. It's like appreciating Indian cinema and the fun and the martial arts and things, and it just happens to be about that. And then this one, like I said, I discovered through watching this recent Best Picture nominee, which I guess may be the Best Picture winner by the time this actually posts.
To pull back the screen a little bit, we are filming this pre-Oscars.
Yeah, it's tomorrow night.
Find out tomorrow. Also decided to do this before the current events of the world are going on.
Yeah, I certainly hope that that's irrelevant, because I do not think that's a situation where we're going to send in troops on the ground into Iran and have any comparisons at all. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. The guy in charge is not the brightest bulb in the greenhouse.
You're talking about the French colonel, correct?
No, he seems very sharp, actually. I think he's portrayed as, I don't know where he stands morally. I don't know what the director thinks of that man morally, but in terms of being like, he's very civilized and upstanding and intelligent and seems very capable. I don't think
Well,
he's given a whole lot of flaws in terms of his ability to do the job. His
and
philosophy seems rotten, but
That's definitely something I want to touch on, but yeah, I don't know
yeah, we
how
should definitely talk
how
about
we want to
there's
approach this structurally.
That's a really good question. So this is I'll just do a really quick synopsis, which is essentially this is France occupied Algeria, country on the North African coast, for about 150 years. Sometime in the 1800s, they essentially took it over from the Ottoman Empire, occupied it, and actually sent substantial numbers of French people over to live there, like actually colonize the country, as in there were like thousands and thousands of French people, the Pieds Noirs, who lived in Algeria. People like Derrida were born in Algeria. It was kind of a part of the French nation for a long time, which is part of why I don't think that's given quite enough attention in this. I don't think this is a balanced approach to that situation because this is not people that like just came into Algeria anyway, but it's a more complicated story than how it's portrayed, I think, in the film. Anyway, a revolt starts breaking out as France weakens after the Second World War in the 1950s, and just across the world is losing its colonies. Like in Vietnam, they lost Vietnam in 1954. I think the other places in Southeast Asia they lost, and they started losing their colonies everywhere as they weakened. And this was someplace where they decided to go ahead and draw the line and try to fight over it for about 15 years or so. This film covers the struggle for the city of Algiers, which is the capital of Algeria, and it represents a particular kind of urban insurgency environment, which became very relevant in the rest of the 20th century. Maybe hadn't been before that. I think that's something to talk about elsewhere, perhaps. But this covers the story of some of the most prominent figures of that uprising. I don't know how, well, we can talk about how biographical and historical the actual people are. I don't know that they really are.
That ties into one of my biggest surprises, but again, we're jumping ahead.
Yeah, there's a couple I can imagine what you're going to say. But anyway, at the end, the French win this battle. They hold on to the city of Algiers, and I think really the situation developed more in the hinterlands and led to the fall of Algeria at the end and the French leaving in 1962.
It was kind of a Pyrrhic victory because they won the battle but lost the international support and to withdraw.
Yeah, they said, I guess so. I don't know enough about the history to know how much this particular, like, was the way they conducted the operation in Algiers specifically, what lost them public opinion and lost them the country. I don't really, I couldn't draw the connection historically if I were to try to do that. Maybe. I really don't know, but.
My understanding, based as someone who did not know what this movie was about and thought it was about something very different. I thought it was going to be a World War II era movie. But I did some research after that.
I see.
And, generally, what I see stuff pointing to online is that the methods that the French commandos used were so brutal that when it was publicized, the international community largely turned against it.
Yeah, I mean, that is certainly the way it's depicted in the film. The French counterinsurgents are not particularly, you don't have a lot of sympathy with them and their methods, and it seems needlessly brutal. And, they use their own
gone through Indochina and then the Suez War.
Right. They were in a bad position, and you could see why they were behaving the way they were to some extent. And also, they were very militarized and were deeply humiliated by the Second World War, if you sort of think about what happened in France at the time, too. So this is a complicated situation for France in the 50s and 60s as a country. So we are drinking something tonight. What did we go with?
So we ultimately went with martinis, largely because I think it is the only alcoholic beverage mentioned by name in the film.
Okay, do we have what I didn't catch, you guys suggested it to me and I was all right, fine, let's run with that. Where did they say that? Was it at the milk bar? Was somebody ordering a martini or?
I remember seeing a sign right before the milk bar scene during that montage that there was just a sign that said martini. So
there's indeed.
I don't remember catching an actual audio reference to it, but I just remember thinking like, okay, well that's what they must be drinking at the time was the martini. So
okay, well, on Toasting the Classics, we have done a lot more with a lot less in terms of references in the artistic works that we've done. So yeah, perfect, great, I love it. I'm not apparently a big fan of martinis. I do not like the way this smells. Yeah, I don't have any olive. What did everybody go with in terms of their mixture on the martini?
Yeah, so I went with gin, vermouth, and olive. And in fact, I wound up dirtying this up significantly because, so while I like a gin and tonic, I think the double botanical hit of the gin and the vermouth makes this really not my drink.
Well, that's why you're supposed to have the bitters, actually. I didn't really understand what they meant, but you're supposed to counter the botanical taste with the bitters. So that's why it's kind of critical to the cocktail. I actually happen to have some bitters, so I have a couple of dashes. I've got vermouth and I've got gin. Did anybody go vodka? Did you say you went vodka, Joe?
No, I've got gin.
Anybody? Is this all
No, I
gin,
went
these are
gin.
all gin martini. Okay, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least we have a control experiment to some extent here. Did anybody you said you had olive, do you have olive as a garnish or do you have olive juice?
Both. I have olive as a
Okay.
garnish, and then I
Okay.
dirtied it up with some olive juice.
Okay, so Joe's got a dirty martini. Andrew, what'd you go with?
So I'm generally not a fan of olives. I'll
Hmm.
have it on pizza every so often, but other than that, not really. So I have aviation gin. I forgot the name of the vermouth, and I'm just using orange bitters, which is my first time using bitters in anything I've made, and I actually like it. I mean, I'm a fan of gin and tonic, so I think the bitters do definitely like create that balance that I guess that you're talking about. So I don't know
Hmm.
if it would be my go-to drink, but I mean, I'm perfectly fine with having this in my cabinet now, and I'll finish off this bottle at least.
There are times in my life where I would try not to seem this stupid, but I think this is to some extent, an educational program. So, what do we mean when we say botanical taste? I'm not sure I understand. I mean, I know what the word botanical means, but what do we mean by that?
I think it's a polite way of saying turpentine.
Oh, really? Oh, oh, I didn't know that. That's not what I was picturing at all. Turpentine, yeah. I remember just smelling turpentine when I was a kid and not being able to get the smell out of my nose for hours afterwards. I don't know why we
Jen
had
has got that.
turpentine.
Jen has got that very floral taste to it. That's by
Yeah.
Yeah,
itself
that's
is
that
really
was my take on it.
irresistible.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just
well,
that.
how interesting. I'll have to think about that a little bit later. But I remember there's a Dave Barry joke where in the American Revolution, one of the only things we actually exported to Britain was turpentine. And Dave Barry was like, well, I don't know if you know, but a little turpentine goes a long way.
Yeah, I went with gin vermouth. I made mine a little bit more era style with more vermouth than is commonly used these days. So it's about a fifth vermouth with the olive and the
Oh, olive
juice
juice or
garnish.
olive?
Olives and some olive juice in
Okay.
here.
Okay. All right.
And I used some black walnut bitters, which I think works quite well. So I'm very happy with my drink.
So
I do
this
have to
is,
say, I felt awful making it because I couldn't find my measuring cup or my
Sugar.
mixed drink measure. So I
right.
used an actual measuring cup. So I'm sitting over my sink, like measuring out alcohol in a measuring cup, feeling extremely Don Draper. It was
Oh,
disgusting.
feeling Don Draper. Oh, I thought you were saying you're feeling dumb. Dumb. I was like, well, that seems like a perfectly good solution to me. I just did equal parts vermouth and gin because that's what I'd heard was the proper proportions. It tastes pretty good to me. It's reminding me a little bit of oh my God, what was that terrible? A Negroni. It's a little bit of that. I think that's heavy on vermouth also. So maybe it's the vermouth is really what's hitting me, but it's a little flat, a little less intense than the taste of that. So this is, I don't know. I don't mind this. Maybe I'd like to try it with some olive juice. I don't know if I would like that. I'm with you, Andrew. I don't like olives. Olives are once every 2 or 3 years, I eat an olive to see if my palate has changed from when I
Hmm.
was a child. And I'm just like, oh, that's disgusting. I don't know why anybody eats those, but
As I
Yeah.
can tell over the history of the martini, the amount of vermouth you put in has shrunk basically every decade since it
okay.
was really introduced.
It certainly has a strong taste, that's for sure. I thought it was, I looked up a little bit about martinis, and this is something I realized with margaritas as well is I don't, how could the history of these things be lost so completely over just like 100 years? Like, how is it so hard to find? Why do we call it a martini? Where was the first martini served? You can't find answers to these things. They're like historical mysteries, and that's so strange to me that that would happen. But I guess probably cocktails are kind of viral, right? You probably invent a cocktail, and before you know it, it's being served all across the country. So
I mean,
martini and
recipes
Rossi,
have
yeah.
that issue as well.
That's one of the theories. One of the theories is it comes from the label Martini and Rossi, but there's also apparently a hotel in San Francisco called I think the Martinez, which was one of the places where it might have been served. Oh no, that's not right. There's a hotel in San Francisco, and everybody was waiting for the ferry or to Martinez, and so they would have this drink there. I don't know. Who knows? But it's not a simple thing to just get on Wikipedia and look up where the name of the cocktail comes from.
Makes me kind of think of Caesar salad. I was ignorant enough to think that it actually originated from Rome, but the fact that it's like a chef or somebody named Caesar in New York or something like that. So I mean,
I have no idea the history. I don't think I would have associated with. Did you know that Little Caesar's Pizza actually doesn't have anything to do with ancient Rome either?
But the mascot.
Yeah, oh, yeah, that's right. So, anyway, so I think let's get back to the film, guys. What else jumped out at everybody?
So yeah, so going back to what you're saying about like the French atrocities, well, this is true. I think the film is bizarrely neutral in its depictions of things, in that I actually dispassionate I think is the word I want here because well certainly because I felt like it starts off kind of focusing more on the wrongdoings of the FLN just because like they're kind of the subject of the camera more often, but it also does not shy away from like the French overreaches either. In fact, the movie literally does start with like immediately like post interrogation of a guy by the French, and like he has some kind of abrasion or something happening on his chest. But
Yeah.
there's
They
not
show
really.
that later. It was a blowtorch to the test. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that might have been a different person being blowtorched, but definitely we see someone getting blowtorched. But
Yeah.
the one thing about the structure of the film is it actually starts out giving away the ending, which I thought I was wondering
Mm.
about. You know, when you're making a film, writing a book, whatever, and you make a choice like that, that's deliberate. And I kept thinking about why.
Well,
I
yeah, yeah.
guess.
It's a kind of the archetypal. I bet you're wondering how I got here. Record scratch to flashback because yes,
Hmm.
because
Oh
the
my
French are
God,
interrogating this
Joe, that
guy.
really trivializes that scene when you think about it.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah, but
I'm
yeah,
picturing
yeah, yeah,
these guys like hiding behind the wall, and the French army's about to blow them all up and kill a child, and they're like,
yeah.
"I bet you're wondering how I got here."
Now this is a
Oh.
story all about my nation got turned upside down.
Always wanted to
Oh,
be a
right.
gangster, right?
Yeah, yeah.
In the
But yeah, yeah.
Casbah, born and raised. Anyway, so
But yeah, yeah. So it's kind of dispassionate, and like the narrative and the camera don't kind of linger on these things. Like if anything, like it lingers on like it doesn't. The camera doesn't really make any moral judgments. Like if anything, the only thing that lingers on is instrumentalities, like how like the chain of events leading up to things. Like we get a lot like possibly one of the longest sequences is like the lead up to like the bombings of the milk bar in the
oh
airport
yeah.
and the things where because they're making a lot of preparations we just follow them all the way through it,
The
but
camera lingers
it's
on the bomb, like as it's
mhm,
being assembled in one point, like a minute long shot of the bomb being
mhm.
assembled. And I was thinking, with
Yeah.
such attention to detail in this film, why do that? You know,
Yeah,
there's
but
a,
conversely, that yeah, but again, but because it is so focused on cinema verite, like we're following the action as it happens. That also means like we're really light on context for things. Like unless someone in the scene asks what's going on, you don't know what's going on. You just have to like follow along and pick it up. Like it took me a while to figure out. Like there's a moment halfway through where I believe some Pied Noirs like do like a revenge bombing in
Mhm.
like
It's
against
the
the Algerians.
police,
But
I
like
think. I think it's the
yeah, yeah.
police that do it.
It
Yeah,
was the police captain, the guy in charge
yeah,
of
yeah.
running the operation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
guy that's in the office looking out the window and talking about all the attacks and stuff, and then suddenly he goes out and sets off that bomb. That apparently that happened. There was a group of French called the Red Hand, and apparently they were very militantly, wanted to be very violent in the reprisals against the FLN, and that's what happened there.
You know what?
And-
That's funny. That makes me think of the times when like you watch a movie and the bad guys are clearly named some sort of like clearly is a bad guy name, and like you've got the French police calling themselves the Red Hand, and you're trying to
no,
like
that's
place yourself.
historical. There's a group
I
called
know, but that's the
that's
thing.
a
The fact
yeah.
that they
You're
actually did
Are
that,
we
like,
the
I guess,
baddies?
yeah.
Totally thinking that. Yeah.
Exactly. No, I don't know how you could be rooting for yourself in that situation. But, people sometimes
Yeah.
they want to sound really hard. They want to sound really tough. So they go with something like that. And, I
Yeah.
mean, we could probably think of examples in the United States military where there's some name for a unit that sounds, particularly belligerent or awful, but that's kind of the point in some
Yeah.
ways, right? I can't
Yeah, but
think of
if
a
you're
good
talking about a
example.
police force
The
versus
the
like a
SS
military
having
force.
skulls on their shoulders is kind of like a, dead giveaway that you might not be on the
Right.
right team, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but
So,
kind of tagging on also with what Joe was saying, and one thing, the little bit of research I was able to do about the film and the history that Pontecorvo apparently wanted to make it look like newsreels,
yeah.
and the fact that when this was surprising to me is that he added grain to some of the footage, which was just like I thought that's just the quality of the film at the time, but that he wanted to kind of stick with that, and so I do appreciate that the way that he portrayed all the different sides was more of a kind of from a distance, like the passionate look at it, that try not to like inject any sort of judgment on them, and also that lieutenant colonel when he came in, I mean he made some comments that was just like, oh, okay, that's actually, he seems like he's at least reasonable in the way that he understands kind of the enemy, or understands the FLN and everything, but then of course he does still use tactics that are just horrible, but
Yeah.
so I kind of like the way that it was done in a way that allowed the audience to make that judgment call.
Yeah, and there's a brief mention of how a lot of the soldiers obviously fighting against the FLN actually fought for the resistance in France during the
Hmm.
war. And that
Yeah.
kind of colors and like deepens the texture of their motivations and the kind of tactics they're used to using and things like that. So,
Right.
and also colors them as like clearly they're not 100% bad guys. They were fighting the Nazis. We like that, right? But this is a confused situation. It's pretty rich. There's a lot of meat on the bone if you want to talk about the history of this, the film, all kinds of things like that. So this movie had a political significance in a lot of ways, right? I don't know how much of the background you guys got into, but this was if you wanted to join the Black Panthers, this was required viewing, right? If
Yeah.
you joined, if you were in Iraq and you were fighting in counterinsurgency warfare after 2003, this was required viewing. And I don't, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure why. I don't know what lessons are being taught.
I think it's logistical. Like again, there's a bit where they go over the like logistics of like organizing a network of independent cells and like the exact
Okay.
ways in which they keep contact and keep themselves isolated to prevent like being all rolled up all one go. Like yeah, that is like yeah, that is literally like the textbook. Like yeah, as you said, like this movie like is the textbook for both counterinsurgency and counterinsurgency that it just like lays out again, possibly because of like its insistence of being so dispassionate and documentarian. Like they're just like, this is what you do. This is how you do the work.
It's a good
Like this is
question.
not the this.
Let me unpick
I,
that word, dispassionate. Do you think this film is dispassionate?
I think the filmmaker might will have a perspective, but I think again the film itself presents a studied neutrality, like Andrew said, because it
Okay.
is kind of aping a like a can't like a journalistic perspective.
What is the word I'm trying to think of? A journalist should have what kind of perspective? Not unbiased, but
Dispassionate, I think.
dis
Unbiased is good as well, but
unbiased because dispassionate there's like the scenes of like the Arab women like ululating and like the aftermath of the bomb at the house and children's bodies being carried and stuff. I guess they're portrayed, it's hard to say that even just the
it's
choice
not
of
it's not
portraying something like that.
unsympathetic, but it's not unsympathetic, but neither is it maudlin. I mean, it's an affecting scene
No.
because it's an affecting event, but the film doesn't like zoom in on
Yeah.
it or like
Yeah. There's some choices being made, but yeah, you're right. It's not overly passionate. There's that scene, the one that really stuck with me. And by the way, we were talking about how a rebellion is organized. And I don't know if
mhm.
you guys caught the musical cues from Andor and
No,
that are
but
taken
that's
from
great.
Morricone's score is copied in several scenes in Andor, especially in the second season with the drumming and stuff like that. So that's definitely the people that made that movie were not unaware of the Battle of Algiers, let's just say. So
I suspect that another portion of the movie that people are the reason people watch it in modern day is less for the tactics and more for it's an example of how not to manage media. They were doing all kinds of things that we would never do in the current day. You like give a media interview to a captured individual like that,
yeah,
where he
isn't
was
that
able to
wild?
Yeah, I was really
answer
surprised by
correct
that.
questions. It shows how you can win the battle and lose the war, as we were talking about earlier, by not managing media correctly.
I don't know how historical the methods are, right? I mean, I'm just talking about what's in the film, but there seemed to be a combination of brutality in like the terror, I'm sorry, the torture tactics that they're using, right? And the bomb that the Red Hand sets off and the things that the French did, but also a certain naivete about how they go about like letting that guy talk to a press conference is a great example, but also the scene where they get a parole from the guys and let them come out of the apartment and say they can hand down a basket. And I'm literally the second David mentioned that, I'm like, there's going to be a bomb in that basket, guys.
Mhm,
What are you
mhm.
doing? Like, why would you take a basket from a terrorist? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. My
But
only thinking
I
is that maybe just that's how new they were to these types of
I
tactics
think
that they
so.
just
The naivete is, yeah, that's
yeah.
exactly,
Like
yeah.
there's no way in hell that anything like that would happen now. But again, I mean
You would
that's
never
part of
do
it.
that like, if you're in Sadr City in Iraq, you would
Yeah.
not take a basket out of a window from one of al-Sadr's men. Like there's no way.
But also at the same time, the fact that those guys were thinking, oh, the lieutenant colonel's going to be the one that walks up to us, as opposed to them, like him sending his subordinate to do
Right,
that.
he's up there in front of everybody.
Yeah, I tied into that naivety thing. I was extremely struck by how, like, after a certain point, the French basically set up checkpoints and are interrogating every man that passes through, but like don't even glance at the women. And of course, like the F1 completely exploit this, like sneak bombs and guns through.
Well, but there's a part earlier where one of the new soldiers attempts to check a woman, and he's like, "No, you don't ever touch their women." So it's like
Hmm.
they're actually being culturally sensitive in a way, right? Because that's a thing. That would definitely be a thing in the Middle East, or I guess North Africa is not technically the Middle East, but in the Arabic world, that would be so they're kind of exploiting their cultural sensitivity in a way by having, but they also, the other thing about it is they dress the women up very specifically and they spend a lot of time on getting ready because they try to look very Franco, the
Hmm.
women that they send through the checkpoints. They're not just Arab women. They're also women who have got their hair up. You know, the girl's flirting with the guard. She's very French, and that's
I
part of
think
what
they
they're
did
trying.
because they did that because they started checking the Arab women
Right.
Mhm.
after they started sneaking things in. So it's all an advance of one and strategy and counter strategy. And
It's actually an interesting lesson. Well, what you could do is you could show this movie, and you wouldn't just use the movie as a text. You use the movie as a starting point for conversations like this,
Hmm.
right?
mm,
Where you say, successful counterinsurgency, you're going to have to understand the local culture. You just can't go in and have no idea what's happening in this place that you're trying to fight an insurgency. But at the same time, there's a back and forth between that. So that could be a productive conversation, I suppose. I don't know what this movie necessarily would have to teach to insurgents either. I guess, like you said, the basic structure.
I wonder how much of the film is lost on us because it was released in 1966,
How so?
so shortly after it took place. I think Liberation was in 64, was it?
62.
62?
Algerian
60,
independence
sorry,
is 62,
62.
yeah.
So everyone in the world, basically, who was going to see this movie already knew about the Battle of Algiers. You didn't have to settle on the table. Many of the facts on it were already known. They might have been constrained on what they could show and what positions they could take, and they had to take a very dispassionate tone.
I think to some extent that's true. They were hoping it would get released in France, and what ended up happening is the movie was actually banned in France for a long time after it came out. It was screened, it was popular, people, it was a critical success, but it was also very controversial. But the big thing with what you're talking about is that the Algerian government 100% supported this project and gave them complete free license to film on the streets of Algiers to do whatever they wanted. There was actually an incident where some citizens saw a bunch of guys with guns dressed like soldiers and thought there was a revolt going on, and so called the cops. And the cops showed up, and there was a confrontation between the actors and Gillo Pontecorvo and the police. And then he actually filmed during that to try to get the nervous looks on all of the cast and then use it in the final cut of the film. Like the people that were scared of the actual police pointing guns at them and stuff. So the realism is just nonstop. It's really great. Like some of those bombs that go off, those look dangerous to the actors. There's a bomb that explodes while they're at the horse race. If you remember the shot I'm
Oh
talking
yeah.
about, the bomb goes off, everybody starts running, and then there's a secondary bomb, and you could see bits of wood and stuff flying past the actors. There's no way you could do that today,
Right.
except maybe with CGI or something, but there's no way you could put actors in danger. Although these are not actors, a lot of them. That's something we
Well,
didn't point out.
you're right. I
So,
was going to mention that part of it too. The
Yeah, so
fact
yeah, so
that
that's my biggest surprise that like a lot of
mhm.
these people were, like our locals who like fought in the war. I don't think anyone plays themselves directly.
Yeah, I mean the actor who plays, I would say probably the character that's most focused on through the whole thing. He's at the opening sequence and the ending. The actor who plays Ali Lapointe, who
Hmm.
apparently has some other name that I didn't know about, but that guy, not an actor, shoe shiner that was in the market one day and somebody spotted him and they were like, and I could see why, because his face is amazing. He's got one of the
Hmm.
best faces I've ever seen in film, especially for black and white. He's just got, I don't know, the bone structure. His eyes are wonderful. Like he's just great. He's not a good actor. That's the funny thing. There's a couple of scenes where he's talking. He's got all kinds of people just love the performance that he gives, and they're right. But the director just nails it because this guy can't act. There's a couple of scenes where he has to talk, and he's not good. But when you put the camera on that guy's face, because it's like a sculpture. It's this thing. Did we talk about the Kuleshov effect in the past in film, where you use musical cues and other
Mm.
cues from the film, and you just if somebody doesn't move their face, you attribute all kinds of emotions to their face. Like Darth Vader can look happy, sad, whatever, if you just put music while you show his face.
Right,
And
yeah,
I
yeah.
think
And any to give context, yeah.
exactly. And I think the director very wisely used this guy's great film face to convey all sorts of emotions that the actor I don't, he's not an actor. He didn't know anything about acting, but I think the
I
guy
guess that, yeah.
I think he's one of the most memorable parts of the film. That and that kid. I love little Omar.
oh yeah.
Little Omar's great. That kid can act. That kid's fun. That reminded me of, I don't know if you guys are super familiar with Les Mis, but of Gavroche, the little boy who's involved I kept thinking of him with little Omar. So, I mean, I'm sure, speaking of things that influence leftist protests and stuff like that, the book Les Miserables must have been, right? Must have been on the mind of anybody making a movie like this also. Like the book, not the play. Obviously, that's much later, but
But
I'm
yeah,
just
yeah, like
curious,
if you're
like,
talking about the guy who played Ali not being an actor, I guess that explains why part of why he vanishes from the narrative for long stretches. Like I like going into the movie again, I kind of expected him to be the viewpoint character because it certainly starts out that way. Like again, we hold on him going into the flashback, we get his backstory, like like his introduction to the FLN, and then just like other stuff happens for a long ass time.
Hmm. Yeah.
The French paratrooper colonel probably has the most lines of anyone in the movie, right?
He's the only trained
True, true,
actor in the
yeah.
entire thing is Jean Martin, the guy that plays Mathieu. I don't remember,
Yeah.
but
Philippe
And he
Mathieu.
only shows
Yeah.
up halfway through. It's a
he only
weird way
right.
to structure a movie.
He's good. Again, he's got a great face. I mean, he's very expressive. He's fun to watch. He actually, the actor, was kind of blackballed in French cinema before this because he was very supportive of the FLN and
Mm.
against the war in Algeria. So it was a very appropriate person to pick. He's also a stage actor, so he wasn't recognizable to a lot of people that were familiar with French cinema. So that's why he was chosen. But he's very good. I thought he was really standout in the movie.
I mean, that's the thing about this movie. Like, it's a weird one to grapple with. I feel like because it's so unnarrative filmic in a lot of ways. Like, I feel like at least I just kind of like I felt like I just kind of took it in, and
Hmm.
certainly like again, just like
Well, for example, I
the
didn't take a lot of notes during the watch. I had lots of things to
mhm.
say, but I mostly just drank the movie in and then thought about it afterwards.
100%, 100%. Yeah, this is definitely the least notes I've taken on anything. In fact, I might have taken slightly more notes on Scrooged.
Obviously,
I
that does
actually
not.
rewatched it, and it is a tough watch the second time through.
Oh, you watched this? Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I gave myself a refresher. I was like, oh, all right. Yeah, actually, yeah, well, I think we have just enough time for a quick ad spot for Tubi, in fact. Another big surprise. Yeah, Tubi has taken apparently got a massive cash injection. We got Criterion Collection and massive Hollywood films on this. Yes, with limited commercial interruption, you too can watch Battle of Algiers on Tubi. Tubi, fast, free ad-supported streaming television. Not a sponsor, but could be.
Could be definitely willing to be a sponsor, guys. Listen to us.
so one of the things that also was kind of like my surprise was that going back to what you were saying,
Wait, we're not supposed to be doing surprises yet, Andrew.
oh,
This is getting to be a mess structurally. This is supposed to be ground game, surprise, decision on the classic.
you know what? It's guerrilla warfare, Dave. You just kind of have to roll
That
with
is a
it.
good point. That is a good point. That
Yeah.
is good. We set off these bombs when they'll have the biggest effect. All right, go for it.
Exactly. No, just that about the history of France and Algeria that I went in thinking it was, recent conquest or whatever else like that. And but then when you start seeing like the thing that was like the kind of funny moment for me was like, oh, those buildings, those stairs, that there's one set of stairs I remember
Oh,
towards the
Andrew,
beginning of the movie.
which funny moment? This movie was hilarious.
Yeah. Well,
Sorry.
funny for me
Yeah,
was that
okay.
like I'm sitting there and I'm watching this, and there's this one set of stairs towards the beginning of the movie that made me think of the movie Ronin, the one with De Niro.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, wow, that just looks like a lot like Paris. But it's like, no, they filmed in Algeria. So that's when it started dawning on me. It's like, no, the French have been here for a while.
Oh
And then
yeah.
when you look at what's it called? Was it the French Quarter, the European Quarter? In
There's the
Yeah, the
European
European
quarter and
quarter.
then there's the Kasbah. And the
right,
Kasbah is the old section of the city that goes back to like 1000 AD. Like
right,
it used to be a fortress. It's built. It's got those crazy winding stairs and stuff like
yeah,
that. But yeah, most of the city kind of looks not much different than Nice or Marseille, right? It's just a
right.
Mediterranean French city in a lot of ways. So
Exactly. So that's when I started realizing that this is a different scenario than, than just that these are just newly created insurgents and that
hmm.
they are upset with the French coming in and taking over their country. But so that so that's why it's like I was missing that part of the history, that understanding that this is something that was grown over, I guess, centuries at this point.
No, it's a much more, that's what I was saying. It's a much more intertwined history than it would be in, say, Vietnam. And even there, I personally, I kind of think the French were a little bit, I don't want to say better. I got to just use the word better. Please don't put like a connotation on this, but they were better about having their culture become part of the colonial situation. You know, the locals would start drinking wine and building houses that looked like French. They spoke French. They read French literature. They contributed. They were just the culture. The French culture is, let's be honest, a little more powerful and beguiling than British culture.
Yeah, yeah. Following up on that, something that I noticed but didn't really do my due diligence on was I found it interesting a couple times. I noticed how often people are speaking French versus Algerian Arabic in this movie.
Hmm.
Because there definitely are points because there are points when like the Algerians just speaking Arabic to each other, but there are also points where they're just speaking French to each other as well. Like early on particular when Ali gets the message from gets a handoff message from little Omar. Yeah, he's like, hey, stop, I can't read this. Read this to me. And it's like and like he's reading it aloud in French. Like
Right.
they're like writing down French communiques to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And why would you do that when you have this other language that you could use? I mean, it may have been that not many people were literate in Arabic, right? Because Arabic is a completely different script.
Hmm.
So if Omar can
I'm sure
read,
that's what you teach in schools. You teach
you
French,
probably
right?
don't teach Arabic. No, exactly right. So whereas I think everybody is probably bilingual. Almost every person in Algiers would be bilingual in French and Arabic. But yeah, that's a good point. Probably Omar might not have been able to read a message in Arabic, which is a liability for this insurgency, right? Because you would think, let's take advantage of the fact that we speak a different language.
Didn't they say that Omar's illiterate? They mentioned that at the very beginning when
No,
they're talking about his dossier.
Ali Lapointe was illiterate.
Oh,
That's why he
right, never
has.
mind.
That's why he hands
Yeah,
the note
yeah.
to little
Omar's little
Omar.
boy. Oh,
Right.
yeah. Although his real name is Ali Omar. Ali Lapointe was his
Right.
nom de guerre. Speaking
Yeah.
of, I wanted to mention one thing I did find very funny, probably unintentionally, was that there's a part where in one of his briefings, the commander of the paratroops, Mathieu, at one point he literally says the phrase "carte blanche" and the subtitles translate it as "we requested a free hand." I just thought that just really
Oh,
tickled me.
yeah, that's funny. But probably they figure Americans are too dumb to know a French expression. But yeah, it's thank God they didn't just say white card, right? That would be even less intelligible. I saw a thing
Yeah.
recently where there was some kind of product that had been made in the country Turkey, and for the
Mm.
American market, they had translated turkey as dand into French. And it was like,
Hmm.
that's the bird. That does not mean the country. Anyway,
Right.
so you have to be careful with these sorts of things. But
Yeah. And actually, if we're on the subject of the subtitles and everything, it's something that I've kind of grown to appreciate. And we were talking in another text group with a friend about the show Pachinko. And one thing that I think they do really well in the show is that they delineate in the subtitles when the characters are speaking Korean and Japanese, because I can understand there'd be a lot of audiences that wouldn't be able to tell the difference when the characters are speaking
I
those
suppose.
languages and they just put the subtitles on the screen.
Did they
And
do
I
that in this?
they didn't. That's the thing. It's
Yeah,
like
I
so
didn't
I'm
think they
No.
did. Yeah.
I'm fortunate that like I'm glad that I actually have enough understanding of French that I can tell, okay, he's speaking French, he's speaking Arabic. But I think that's
That's what,
one thing that
4 years of high school French in America gives you the ability to tell the difference between French and other
well, and some
languages.
college too, you know. But but that's the thing. It's like I think it would have been great to include something like that for some of the audiences who are watching
I
this
could
so
see
they
that because there's a
understand.
message, like we were saying, there's a message there. There, when
Yeah.
they choose to speak Arabic and when they code switch between those languages,
Hmm.
that's part of the message of the film, right? There's a
Right.
reason why they're doing that. Although they may have left it up to the actors because there was a lot, the dialogue was actually not given to actors. Like the guy who played Ali Lapointe, they just told him, this is how you feel in this scene. And he would
Right.
react with his own language. So I don't know whether maybe they didn't leave the choice of, I don't know. A lot of this realism leaves you thinking how much was planned, but it's very convincing. The realism is very convincing, right? So backing up a little bit, they gave a disclaimer in the theater, especially in America, that said that none of this is documentary footage. Not a single foot of documentary footage has been used in the film. Because I actually thought a couple of times, I was like, oh, that is that a shot from the actual
Hmm.
resistance? But then someone was pointing out, I don't remember what I was reading, but the crowd scenes are probably the ones where I started thinking, oh, that's got to be actually from the insurgency, right? And they're not. And one of the ways you can tell is that they're always shot from the perspective. Well, no, that would be true of journalistic footage too. They're always shot from the perspective of someone who's protected by French soldiers, right?
Hmm.
They're never from the view of the out. Well, there's that one where they're firing off the bridge. That's pretty famous, where you're just seeing a couple. But the mob scenes, the big crowds, the camera is always protected by a cordon of some kind of French protection in most of those scenes. I didn't. I'm taking somebody else's word for it. I didn't study it, but it rang
Right.
true to me at least overall.
I mean, that could have been a choice to do that very intentionally, or it's also
Oh well,
just
yeah, it was. It
as
was.
far as the cinematography is concerned, that's also just easier shot to film the crowd from that perspective instead of from within the crowd.
I also think there's a little Blair Witch going on here. I think they didn't mind if they kind of fooled people into thinking it was documentary footage, right? I mean, although why go to all that effort and stuff like that, and then I don't know. It's must have been incredibly difficult to get all those people involved in the shots and
Well, it seemed to be that from what I had read that there was a lot of pride from the Algerians as well that they wanted to participate just as much as
Mhm.
that they wanted to tell their story about it. And
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's crazy that they were also willing to put themselves through that trauma of reliving those experiences. That there was another story where there was one woman who they shot a scene, I think it was during one of the bombings,
Hmm.
and she cried out that, my son died and,
Hmm.
died here. And they took a moment, they paused out of respect for her, and they wanted to make sure that, that she was going to be okay with it. And then that from that point they continued, and I think that helped probably the filmmaker get the respect of the locals that he was willing to do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And not only were a lot of the people, the Arab actors, sorry, I'm saying actor, the people who acted in the film, they're not actors, professional
Yeah.
actors, but a lot of the Arabs in the movie were people who participated in the insurgency. Not only was that true, but some of the French people were actual counterinsurgents who had fought against the Algerians during the war. And there were moments where the casts of both sides are in the room together and they're looking at each other and they're like, "Oh, that's a guy that used to hunt me and like want to kill me 5 years." It's not even that long. The film is
Right.
in 66. This happened in 19 the action of the film takes place in 60, 59.
It goes from
Yeah.
54 to 60.
54 to 57 comes to mind now that you say
Yeah.
that. That
Right.
sounds about. And I think it's mostly after Dien Bien Phu though, but so whatever. Anyway, it hasn't
Yeah,
been
it's
10
it's
years.
61. 61 was when the paratroopers were called in.
Okay, that's later than I thought. All right, yeah. So, but anyway, yeah. I mean, very, very recent memory. This would be like American soldiers going to Vietnam to film a movie in 1976. It's unthinkable, right? I mean, even like
Right.
something like Apocalypse Now, and obviously, again, Coppola influenced by this film when he did what he did. Something like Apocalypse Now, filming right after the Vietnam War, is pretty intense. Not actually filmed in Vietnam for obvious reasons, but this was an open wound at the time these movies were made, which is really impressive when you think about it.
I was just saying we had similar conversations after 9/11, that those movies that came out immediately afterwards, and there's this one movie that you don't know it's about 9/11 until the very end of it. And that came out within years of
Well,
it
well,
happening.
do you remember what movie that is? I'm not sure.
I mean, does
I know what
anybody
you're
care if I
talking about.
spoil
Like,
it?
yeah, yeah,
Because it literally is like you have no
yeah,
idea it's happening until it get to the end of the movie.
yeah.
Um,
It's the twist ending. Yeah, I know the movie you're
it's
talking about, but I can't
it's
remember the
probably a
title off the
bit
top of my
like
head.
what is there's a film that takes place, it's a romance story, and the last shot of, I think it might even be a Twilight Zone episode. It's a romance episode, and at the end it shows that they're on the Titanic. The whole,
It's something like that, yeah.
it's like that.
Where
Yeah, there's probably a similar reveal, but
yeah,
I was totally incorrect, by the way. It was 57 that the paratroopers were brought in.
I
My
thought I thought it
apologies.
was more, but
yeah.
it's
But I
not
think the
it's not
movie does
important.
go
Anyway,
through
it's very recent
1960 at
memory, but
least.
it's very recent memory is the
Yeah.
point, the main point of what we're talking. But 9/11 is an interesting thing to talk about, and I wanted to make sure we had some time to talk about it because it's very difficult. Actually, it's not even 9/11. To be honest, for me, it's 79 and the revolt, the revolution in Iran. It's very
Hmm.
difficult to be as sympathetic with these revolutionaries as you would have been in the 60s. You would have been like, yeah, it's a national liberation movement. They don't
Mhm.
depict them as being religiously fundamentalist. The women are
Uh,
involved
they,
in it. They show that they're
they
religious, but not fundamentalist. There's some scenes where they're practicing Islam, but it's just it's just a wedding. There's nothing weird
I
about
mean,
that.
Ali like specifically like shoots a pimp, although it's left a little. Although he's never identified as such in the dialogue, but I think it's pretty clear that's what's going on, given like where
Yeah.
Ali goes to find him and where he's killed,
But
and
you know
then
what
like
though?
a scene after that, some kids are incited to like beat a drunkard.
I was okay. Tell me
Yeah,
about
they
that
outlaw
scene. I didn't
drugs, they
understand,
outlaw alcohol, they outlaw drugs, they outlaw alcohol, they outlaw prostitution.
but
They take charge of.
those could just be
Yeah.
anti-European things. You know what I mean? It's not really
They
portrayed
are,
as
but
being
they also outline the punishments. It's first
Hmm.
time you get a warning, second time you get a warning, third time you're dead.
okay. I mean, I
But
didn't really
but it's interesting
catch
though.
on to that, but
Yeah.
we in the 60s, especially as Americans, we just did not have a history with Islamic fundamental. It just wasn't on the radar. You just watch this and you'd be like, this is a
Yeah,
national liberation movement. Maybe I see some Vietnam echoes and it makes me upset if I'm super conservative, but watching it post Iranian Revolution is definitely like, oh, this is it. It didn't actually go that bad in Algeria. Algeria is a pretty moderate government. There's definitely some terrorist elements in Algeria. There have been some attacks and things like that. But Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, not Libya for different reasons, but those countries in North Africa, I think in large part because of the French influence, are more moderate, generally speaking, than some of the other areas. And it's not really associated with the same sort of thing. And then as an American who grew up watching obviously what happened in Iran and then 9/11 and all the things that have happened, it's very, very much more complicated and difficult to side with these people 100%. I mean, you get it. It's a national liberation movement. We had one. We root for that. I get it. Colonialism is a bad thing. Imperialism is a bad thing. But you kind of know what lurks under the surface of these sort of movements in that part of the world, and it's a little less easy to side with them, if you know what I mean. It's a little more complicated.
I
Yeah,
had a really hard time sympathizing with anyone in this movie, and
yeah,
I
I would
did a
say so.
little bit of extra research on some of the things they left out. I will say what they left in was appears to be really fairly accurate from what I can tell.
Hmm.
But they did leave out some stuff like Ali Lapointe assassinating a mayor of a nearby town, and
Okay.
then at his funeral the next day, they bombed a cemetery.
And these would have been all
There,
Arabs he was killing.
no, I think the mayor of the adjacent town was French.
Okay. Well, then I mean, we show them murdering French people. I mean, we're sort of meant to feel like that's justified, I guess. I saw some things
But
talking about this movie that had the old adage that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, right? We're all familiar with that statement.
Hmm.
I've always had a problem with that because to me, terrorism is a tactic, a thing you do. You set up a bomb in a cafe and you kill innocent people, you're a terrorist. The question is your struggle worth doing that? I can't really think of a struggle that would make it worth it to me, but I could imagine where that tactic could be justified in some situations. It's hard to
well,
justify it. But no matter what
let's
you're
look at what
fighting
the
for, you're a
French
terrorist. That's a terrorist
let's look at
tactic.
what the French were doing though at the same time. They were
Absolutely.
it, there are strong estimates that they had illegally abducted about 30% of the male Muslim population and the male Arab population, I guess I should say, in Algiers. From what we can tell based on confessions and interviews after the fact, torture was just mandatory.
Hmm.
And a good portion of those people were stuffed in barrels or put in cement shoes and dumped in the
Yeah, yeah,
harbor.
yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe it's justified. I'm just saying it's definitely terrorism, right? And the thing the police do when they set off that bomb is also terrorism. It's certain tactics
Yeah.
that are being used. It doesn't really matter what your struggle is I guess what I'm saying. It's not that one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. It's you could be both, right? You could be a freedom fighter who does things like that. It's hard for me to see it.
We've left it behind a little bit, but also like and again a good chunk of the movie is devoted to like the general strike, and then like
Mhm.
like the army being brought in to break the strike, like forced labor. Although I think there was no particular indication that they weren't being like they were just being dragged back to work. They weren't like being forced to go without wages. But yeah,
But
again
weird, right?
I don't.
It's weird. We would feel like that. We would not support that at all. If people walked off the job, we would never support the army forcing them to go back to work. That's bizarre to me.
We've seen it happen in our country, though.
We totally. I'm saying we as modern people would not support such a thing at all. I mean, it's definitely happened in America. There's multiple riots and massacres and things that happen in various industrial cities over time where people were striking, and usually the police, not the army. There might be some examples of the army. I wouldn't say there aren't, but that seems very alien, right? Like to
Well, I mean,
force people to work.
people are
But
forced to work right now. The TSA is forced to work. I mean,
well, but if they walked off the job, nobody would like shoot the guy, right? They would just not. They would go without pay or something like that. They'd be fired. There wouldn't be. You wouldn't be literally a gun pointed at you making you go to work.
no, I think you can be prosecuted. And when air
That's
traffic
interesting.
controllers tried to go
At the
on
end of the day,
strike,
that
they
means
were
a gun's pointed at you, right? So yeah, that's interesting. I don't really know much about that, but nobody else saw One Battle, right? So we shouldn't talk about that. I actually kind of think maybe we should do a follow-up episode where we watch One Battle.
I'd be up
Anybody?
for that. I've been dying for about a month to know what scene from this movie you thought was pulled directly from One Battle. I assume it's the part where they lower the bomb down.
It's
If
not it's
not,
not it's not as specific as a scene. There's a I don't want to give it away, but it's a longer sequence, let's just say. There's a
okay,
sequence of the film that is just
Okay.
shot after shot stolen from this movie. Or not, it's an
okay.
I
homage.
mean,
It's
it's
perfectly
yeah,
fine.
but that's the thing. It's like that's the other great thing about watching this movie now is that you can see its DNA that's
In
been
so
seeded
many
in,
things. In
yeah,
so
all
many
these
things.
different
Yeah,
places,
absolutely. Yeah.
and some more so than others. And One Battle is one where it's just all over the place.
Yeah. I mean it's a directed that mention the movies. I mean, I think that one's fair game.
Right.
The Red Dawn thing is two whole scenes that are very distinctive from that film that are used in the shots from Battle of Algiers that are used in that film.
Right.
But again, I was thinking, now I've kind of grown out of this a little bit, but when I was a kid, I would watch Red Dawn, and you get this like thrill every time the Russians are blown up. I have to say, I don't
Mhm.
really have that same level of maybe jingoism that I did when I was a kid, but I definitely was not watching this and having like a big excitement when they're blowing up French people. I just, you're not really siding with them the same way or something. I don't know. Maybe that's a failure of my imagination, but I don't know. Did you guys feel
I
that?
think it's pretty. Yeah, I don't think you can call this a feel-good movie, no matter which side you're sympathizing with.
But is it
If you sympathize
exciting?
with
Do
either.
you get that violent like that kind of catharsis you get when you watch evil be punished sort of thing?
Well, yeah, I just yeah, it's just too dispassionate. Like, who is the evil? Who's being punished?
I kind of I want to push back on that. I don't know if I want to disagree with the word dispassionate, but I feel like the filmmaker is clearly on the side of the Algerians in my mind. I don't think the French are
I
given
think that
much. They're not good guys almost at all. They're not evil caricatures necessarily. Now, he does show that they fight with certain rules of war that actually lead to some of them getting killed, so that's kind of noble in a way.
But then
right.
we also see them, like not
We
hesitate
also
at all
see
to
them
engage in
torturing people.
torture.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
they
I mean,
they
yeah,
they,
no.
they have rules of engagement they play by until they don't.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't know I don't know what to say about that. I mean, one thing that shocked me is the use of the guillotine, right?
Yes, yeah,
I
that's true. I
was
forgot about
aware
that.
that the
Yeah,
guillotine lasted longer than I thought, but did anybody else look this up? Because I want to ask this question to the field. When do you think the last use of the guillotine was? What would be
1950s.
1950s, Andrew?
That's my guess.
Yeah, I would have said here at Algiers because I can't think of any other time they've ever
Chris,
done it.
do you have a
Are these Price of Right rules? I'll go 1974.
all four of us were alive when the guillotine was used the last time. It was September 10th, 1977.
By
Isn't
whom
that
Wow.
and on whom?
it was a Tunisian murderer, and I think I think it was a Tunisian who lived in France, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't know if no, Tunisia was an independent country, so it must have actually been in France, and it was outlawed after that. It was actually not outlawed until 1981, but the last
Well,
use was in 77.
probably, television and video recordings make it a lot harder to make it palatable and everything.
Well, the funny thing is, and not to get too far down the guillotine track, but the guillotine was actually invented to make executions humane.
Right.
It was
Hmm.
actually
Hmm.
supposed to be an
Yeah.
improvement on what they'd been doing before
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Over
I
like
mean,
just
And
having
it
a guy
was,
with a sword. Yeah.
and it was because I was just reading a book about the English Civil War, for example, and there were multiple people who were condemned to death, and then the executioner botched the job and like almost cut their head off kind of situation. You're like, yeah, okay, a guillotine would be an improvement on that, but pretty
yeah,
barbarous
but I
from
mean,
our perspective. So
yeah, it's kind of hard to watch somebody's head being completely lopped off. I mean, not that electrocution or hanging or any of those other methods are any
I
better,
was
but
about to say, let's be honest, it would be impossible to watch that unless there's something wrong with you. I don't know how you could enjoy watching
yeah,
or just even stomach something like that happening.
yeah.
So let's not get
They
into
were
that.
big entertainment draws back in the day.
I bet it was. I bet it was. It was
I mean, I
required.
remember, I remember back in high school, like a lot of people were like looking at pieces of death.
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I have to confess, we did get that once from the video store, and I tried to watch it with some from Mike Sawicki and some other friends, and his mother was very offended that we wanted to watch it, but she got it, so whatever. But
yeah.
I think it actually turned out that was fake, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think there was anything
That
real in that
yeah,
that.
I
that's
mean,
my
that would
understanding is
explain why
that
it wound up at Blockbuster.
But I'm not the kind of person that wants to see something like that. If a YouTube video, if I don't know nobody was severely hurt in the video, I can't stand watching it. Like I'm not, I don't have any stomach for that kind of thing. But the Arabic they speak is very odd, by the way. I actually studied Arabic in Jordan, and they had their own very weird. I lived in a family that was Bedouin, and they had their own very odd Arabic. A couple of times I made the mistake of repeating the words I'd learned while I was at school, and it like sent ripples of laughter through the room because it sounded like it was like if you walked into a classroom in America and just you're a foreigner and you're speaking like like gangster talk or something like that. Like like it was I was using very inappropriate words. I there were a couple of times, actually the wedding scene when the guy's the imam I'm guessing is like running the wedding. He was talking. I was like, oh, all of a sudden I understand. I understand some of what this guy's saying because this is like classical Arabic. And then when they're talking to each other on the street, I'm like, I don't even. I'm looking at the subtitles and I know the word for what they just said, and they did not say the word that I know. They're speaking almost like a completely different language. It's probably partially what's the group of people from that region? It's probably influenced by Tuareg or something like that. Berber is the one I was thinking of. Any more thoughts on the Battle of Algiers, gentlemen?
I'm still kind of sitting with it. It is the combo of the subject matter and the cinema verite style, I think really makes it gets under your skin.
It does,
And
and
I
it's
saw
hard.
that they used. I just saw that they used a lot of natural light in the movie, and that really comes through.
They used only
It
natural
adds to
light.
that feeling. I don't know if that's accurate because
They said that they used only
that's what they
natural
said.
light. There were a couple of scenes where they allowed the people to use handheld flashlights, like the soldiers'
that's
flashlights, illuminate the
okay.
scene. There was a scene where they
Well, I was
filmed at
thinking
night.
when he's in the dark about to be bombed, that's clearly not natural light.
That's a really like when they're in the hide hole kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a good point. But in general, it was all sunlight. They had a couple of shots that they did by street light, and in the middle of one of the scenes, the street light actually went out, and they continued filming in what light they could get, and actually it made the final cut for the film. I don't exactly know what scene that was, but lighting is a big part of the movie that really contributes to the Cinema verite, is that the same thing as we're talking about
Yeah,
with realism? Would this be cinema
Yeah.
verite?
it's a tradition they're working
Yeah.
with. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Oh, the three women who place the bombs get a good chunk of the movie, and you get a good feel for each one of those different women.
we didn't even
I
mention
thought
that
that,
part. That part's terrific. That part's very
yeah,
powerful. Yeah.
I didn't want to go without talking about it a little bit. I thought they were all fascinating. Two of the three of them, very interesting reads on their biographies on Wikipedia.
No, I didn't know anything about it. Yeah.
Definitely suggest checking those out.
They had great faces for film, very much like the Ali Lapointe actor too. I mean, I could just watch that. Well, all three of them really, but the one woman, well, they were all different in a sort of way, right? The two of them were like very beautiful in a very different kind of way that was really fascinating. My eyes wouldn't leave their faces, and the one she had this very severe face. They're not actors, right? But the scenes just work so well. That one girl when she's
Yeah.
flirting with the soldiers and stuff like that. I mean, everything about the whole thing is just really well done. And they're putting the bombs in the cafes and stuff. Again, it's really hard to believe that I don't know if you're not rooting for them, right? This is a really terrible thing they're doing, like killing these innocent people, but you feel for them. You feel the nervousness that they would be experiencing. You kind of empathize in a way.
Yeah,
There's
I
the
mean
one,
that's
the woman in the cafe has that particularly sort of sad expression on the way out that I thought
Right.
was really,
yeah, no, but I mean that's the thing. It's like going back to what we were also talking about, where I think what works well for this movie is the fact that you get to see the escalation, that you want
Mhm.
to be sympathetic towards the Algerians, but then like you see how the French escalate, and so then you think, okay, well, I can understand why they would take it to the next level, but it doesn't make them into heroes. It doesn't make them into like a situation where it's like it's justified. It's just you understand why they're doing it, and
You
that's what
understand
makes
why
it
they're
so
doing
difficult to sit with that you can see why they're doing this, but you can also see the struggle they're going through with committing these acts. I think the one exception for me is just that at the end, Ali was the only one that seemed to be like the true believer who was willing to go do whatever it took to drive the French out.
Those ladies putting bombs in the cafe, and then they know what they're doing. They see children in there and stuff. That's pretty far. That they're
That's true
going,
too.
they're
Yeah,
going pretty far with that, and you can tell, like you were saying, they're not cool with it. They're not
right,
they're not just so hateful they want to murder children. They're really conflicted, but they do it anyway. Chris,
right.
Although that one lady is so into it that she's like, "I'll bring my own child as cover."
is it her child? I thought she sort of borrowed a
Yeah.
kid in
No,
the
she
No,
said she
cafe.
it's
would
her.
bring
yeah, it
her
was
kid.
Okay.
her child. But it does tie directly into the media battle later in the movie, which is apparently kind of word for word the direct exchange that they had with the journalist when
Okay.
they're talking about is it honorable for you to have women carry bombs in? And he says, is it honorable for you to use planes to drop
Napalm
napalm
on, yeah.
and kill hundreds of times more people than we do?
Yeah.
You give up the napalm, we'll give up the bomb.
Yeah, it's a solid point. It's a solid point. I might cut me saying this, but one of the observations I've made fairly recently is that we all talk about World War II as being this example of like just great evil, right? Like what the Germans did to the people of Europe, like invading all these countries, like invading places like France and taking over and killing people in order to take over the country and stuff, and how that's the greatest evil you could possibly do. And one of the things I've realized lately is it's the problem that everybody in Europe observed with that is that the Germans did it to Europeans. Because all these countries like France and Britain and things like that, when they were taking over places in the rest of the world, they killed just as many people and were just as brutal as that. Maybe not the Holocaust specifically, but they did just as much brutality as the Germans ever did in colonizing or imperializing anyone. So does anybody have a really concrete biggest surprise, something from the film? I mean, for me, it was just the shock of seeing that shot from Red Dawn. I mean, I know that movie backwards and forwards, and that was like a slap in the face. But anyway, that's a minor biggest surprise. Otherwise, I didn't know this was in black and white. That struck me as soon as the film started. I wasn't expecting that. Joe, you have something?
So we've touched on this before, but it was definitely my biggest surprise that yeah, that many of the people in the film like were not actors who had participated in the events.
That is
Kind
very
of
surprising, very shocking on both sides, right?
yeah,
Like that's
yeah.
really something to notice.
Yeah, smaller was that I was totally expecting like when I went into the movie, I was expecting Ollie Lapointe to be the main character, like the perspective character, and like Nick, he's not really. He's maybe the closest we get, but he's not again because he just vanishes for a long part of the movie. And so I was expecting him to be like a composite character, and no, he was a real guy, not played by himself, but he was an
Not played
actual
by
person.
himself, but
Although there are composite characters in the movie.
we didn't mention this at all, but one of the actors who's the older guy, El Hadi Jafar, the guy who brings
Hmm.
Ali Lapointe into the struggle, that actor wrote the book, The Battle of Algiers.
Hmm.
Oh,
and I think did actually participate in some of the events that happened. But that guy, so I said actor again, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The guy who plays that, he's the guy who wrote the book upon which this is based.
I think mine goes back to because I unfortunately knew a lot of the movie trivia, like just in generalities of, the fact that these are all real people and not, hired actors and whatever else of that. So just the history of, I just assumed that,
Why
oh,
did
this
you
is
know
gonna
all
be.
that? Did you take a course on film or something? Or
No,
what did
no,
you?
just that these are things I just pick up and like, YouTube videos I watch about movie, history and then like,
Cool.
talking about the influences of like, and it was primarily also most of the stuff I gained because of one battle after another. Then it made
Okay.
me go back and learn more about Battle of Algiers, which is then
Oh,
why
I
the reason
see.
why I wanted to watch this film. But it's just, but that's why like without knowing the historical background and not realizing that, that the again, this wasn't just a newly colonized situation by the
Right.
French. And so, and that, that it's just so interesting to see how either this has been simmering under the surface all these, these decades, with the Algerian people. But yeah, so I mean that's why it was just kind of, surprise for me. But I also wanted to add on, I think as I think more about the movie, as soon as the more I digest it, because I only just finished it like a couple hours ago, I think my favorite scene is when the little Omar grabs that microphone and starts giving that speech, and to
Yeah.
me, it's almost like it reminds me of the scene in Andor of I forgot the character's name, her funeral and her like
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
pre-recorded
Yeah. Yeah.
speech,
Yeah. Yeah. Very,
that kind
very
of like
similar.
inspiring speech. So it's just like
Yeah.
I just really enjoyed that part
I
too.
thought Little
Marvelous.
Omar stole the show a couple of times. There's a bit where he sells a newspaper to a Frenchman, gets his money, and then about the strike, about like the strike starting, and then as he's walking past, he looks at the camera, but he's talking to a character, and he's like, "We did it," and he's got that great smile, and it was just like, "Oh, that kid's gold." Like I'm so
Hmm.
glad he's in this movie. That I want to say actor, not an actor, but that kid is terrific. So. I thought one of the biggest surprises, and Chris actually said it before, was like when you said that you thought this was going to be about World War II, like just where this was situated historically, I think is pretty surprising if you didn't expect that. Did you have something else?
I came into this completely cold, so I had no
Okay.
idea about the movie. In a sense, everything was a tremendous surprise. The fact that I apparently really like martinis is a tremendous surprise.
I know, I love it.
But
I love it. I've got like the perfect level of happy buzz too, which is just great. It might
yeah,
get
I
dark
don't think
if I
you
keep
can
going, it might get dark, but we'll see.
enough of that salty taste where I don't think I would want to keep going too, though.
Hmm.
It's a weird
I'm in a
drinking
good mood.
experience.
I'm feeling no pain. I'm happy, so I don't know.
I guess coming in cold like that, the biggest surprise to me was that it was such a cinema verite experience. I had no idea that it was scripted. So, for example, when Ali is doing the three card monte thing at the beginning, I'm thinking to myself, okay, well that'll come back in the later end of the movie. But no, they're really trying to be as true to life as possible. And that was really impressive to me. The way a lot of these shots were framed and everything else. It's a gorgeous movie that is tremendously unpleasant to watch. But I watched it twice, which said something. I don't know. I'm sitting with it still.
I would say some of the same things about Children of Men. It's very similar. It is very unpleasant. It's just a great. The movie is filmed
I think the big
impeccably. You
distinction
know,
for me is that there is concretely someone or something you can root for in Children of Men.
That's true. Sort of. I mean, yeah, yeah, there's more of a positive. Yeah, that's true. There's something positive to bite into. Well, let's go ahead and get our votes. What does everybody say? I'm not hearing any people that don't feel great about this film. Anybody want to be the voice of reason for this group think we've got about this film, or what should we do here? I thought it was garbage. I'll just say that.
Well, as a French partisan, I'm sure that I'm not surprised you feel that way,
That's right.
given
Yes.
along with the rest of your countrymen, banned this film and did walkouts at the award ceremonies for decades.
Yeah. Exactly.
But no, I
So.
think but yeah, this film is just unmistakably classic. If nothing else, yeah, it's like so influential. Who could speak against this film that isn't French?
I mean, we haven't even talked about some of the influences. I mean, we talked about Children of Men, but Traffic, have you guys seen that?
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
one's so Battle of Algiers. There's a couple of Catherine Bigelow films. And by the way, these are all directors that I saw quoting that they loved this movie. Christopher Nolan loved this movie. He said it was a big inspiration for Dark Knight. Mad Max, George Miller loved this movie and used a lot of the same kind of explosions and things like that, some of the pacing of the action and things like that. So it's hugely influential. I mean, it's a bit like The Searchers in that way. I don't know if I would have noticed how good this movie was if I just watched it in a vacuum. If I didn't know it was an acclaimed film, I paid more attention because smart people said it was good, and I thought it was terrific. It gets my vote.
This is
Well,
not
there's
a movie you
also
watch with your phone on. No.
No.
No, no, oh, God forbid. I mean, you shouldn't ever do that. Please, people out there, when you watch movies, pay it. Someone put a lot of effort into these things. It's only 2 hours. Put the damn phone away and
Yes,
watch
and
it.
we drink after watching the movie, not during.
That's right.
Just the fact the use of handheld cameras. I mean,
Yeah.
at the time, I mean, it's wild that they thought to do
That's
that because again, it get
revolutionary at the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Insurgent, some might say.
But yeah, I mean, just the fact that it's so commonplace now, and this is one of those examples of the movies where it makes me happy to watch a movie like this. That makes me happy to know that like how influential it was, and that all these things that we take for granted now came because of movies like this.
Yeah, so this is a classic, you're saying.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. Chris, are you on board? Are we going to make it unanimous?
This is the movie that I had the most trouble deciding on
Oh,
whether or not it's a
really?
classic.
Okay.
Yeah, and just for the reasons I said earlier, I find it so hard to engage with any media that doesn't have someone you can root for.
Some
And
kind of narrative hook that you would.
yeah, and there's really no narrative hook here.
Yeah. It's more of an
There are certain
achievement of
TV shows that
filmmaking than it is like a great movie that you can kind
it
of.
is.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
guess that's the axis I have to come down on and say that because of how influential it is, it's probably a classic. But at the same time, it's
You don't love it. You're not going to
really
watch it
hard to.
10 more times.
I would make the argument that it's the people of Algiers that that would be the hero of the movie. That you're watching their story unfold with these other actors, affecting
Yeah, but
their
I've been made
lives.
more, they're morally ambiguous a little bit to me. It's a little hard to 100% get behind it, but we seem to have been approaching consensus. Chris was the lone dissenter, it seemed like. He had like some mixed feelings about this film. I agree with what you're saying, Chris. I feel like this is not a movie I'm going to rush out to like, hey, I'm going to watch this 10 times. There's not a lot of I feel like a movie like Traffic that sort of draws on this and has like a bleak finale, and there's not a whole lot to root for on either side in that movie in the same kind of way, has some moments of levity and entertainment that this movie is lacking and would make it a better rewatch. I'm not saying I never ran out and watched that movie again. Even Children of Men has some narrative focus, a little bit of humor every once in a while, some character, some I mean, what's got real actors, you know? I mean, you got people who can charm you a little bit more than anybody in this one can because yeah, Jean Martin really stood out, but otherwise it's not a whole lot to sink your teeth into narratively, character, those kinds of things. It's really just kind of
Yeah,
brilliantly filmed and
arguably, who is the lead in this? And would you recommend this movie to anyone who's not a film student?
I wouldn't recommend it to anybody that I didn't think was going to take it seriously and, like approach it from some other vector than entertainment. You guys, we've crunched through some movies recently, so I know you guys can handle this, but yeah, I wouldn't recommend it or call it a classic to anybody that just likes to watch the Avengers.
Yeah, and that's the challenge of this movie is that it's one thing when you have like I'll use Andor as an example. You watch Andor and that's a situation where you can easily root for the rebels. You can easily see who the fascist villains are and everything. But this one is supposed to challenge you. It's supposed to make you think, what who are we rooting for and what are their reasons for doing this? And then it kind of makes you pause and think about it a little bit.
That just want to say, The Avengers, by the way, is a movie you can have your phone out while watching. Totally okay.
Well,
I
no,
don't
no,
know,
there
man.
are parts of it.
The original Avengers film I would stand by as being a pretty good goddamn movie. I think that's a very watchable, very entertaining movie while not being stupid. I think that one, for what it is pretty darn good. I mean, it's up there with one of the 2 of 9 good Star Wars movies. I've realizing lately that there really aren't a lot of good Star Wars movies, but
I was shocked that you would put it as high as 9.
no, I'm saying there are 2 out of the 9 Star Wars movies that are good.
Oh,
I,
you're not including,
oh,
the
true.
Han Solo
Yeah.
movie and Rogue One.
Oh, Rogue One, Rogue One. Okay, so if let's jump it up to 11 Star Wars films. 3 of them are worth watching, I would say. So yeah, it looks like the Battle of Algiers, 1966. Gillo Pontecorvo is going to go down in the annals of history as being a classic film. Classic film overall. I don't think we even need to narrow it down to French New Wave or to war film or anything like that. This is just a classic film, I think. I think this one gets the nod, generally speaking. Maybe in terms of influence, top 100. I think this one would have a pretty good argument for being in that. Something like we said, like we did the Searchers before, something along those lines that maybe isn't that great as a movie to watch, but is really a classic film. I mean, that part of Godfather 2 where he's obsessed with the revolution in Cuba is again Battle of Algiers. That's Coppola looking at the Battle of Algiers and putting it into his movie in a way that I always thought seemed kind of shoehorned and awkward. But anyway, that's a whole different thing. I think we should do one battle. I think we should get this crew together and we should do one battle sometime soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd
I
love
mean,
to do that.
I
Yeah.
like the fact that you've got all these filmmakers who love this movie, but it's not one of those pretentious movies that they love it for the artistic style,
No,
whatever. That there's definitely art in their style to this, but it's not that for the sake of being that.
no, this one works. This one just works as a movie. It's not enjoyable as a movie, but it works
No,
as a movie. It's not confusing, and you're not trying to figure out what is exactly going on in this movie in any like when you watch one of the examples I always thought of is 2001 is just this gorgeous piece of filmmaking, just absolutely beautiful. But you're sitting there, you're like, what is happening in this? And that's not even that artsy compared to some of the movies that people really like. Let's go ahead and finish up our vote officially. Toasting the Classics is voting for this one. This one's great. I want to thank everybody who's listening. I want to thank everybody that joined me. My name's Dave McArthur. Thanks for coming out and listening to this film classic. Maybe a lot of people haven't heard of this one. I hope we're expanding some horizons here.
Thanks for joining, everyone. It's been great to talk.
au revoir and vive la révolution.
And Joe?
I can't top that.
No, I don't think you can. Peace out, everybody.